Hi, my name is Sean Majo. This is a video of my plastic recycling plant, the east of Pretoria, Waterloo, where we process waste plastic, specifically polypropylene and high-density polyethylene, commonly known as HDPE and PP, and we convert that into usable material. I started the business about 3 years ago, formally in this space. But I also built some of my own machines following the precious plastic model that I started in my garage many years ago. This is just basically an introduction video to show what we do here at the business. This is what I started the business with. These are some small open source designed shredders. So basically anyone can find these blueprints online and you can basically build your own shredders. Obviously there's no motor and gearbox connected to it, and we started shredding plastic with these small things. I then moved on and tried to upscale production a bit, and this was a redundant machine from an old factory that I managed to get my hands on, and I basically completely rebuilt this machine from scratch. And this is a super large or medium-sized to large industrial grade machine, and we basically shred waste plastic in this one. We were shredding plastics at first and just selling it along, but unfortunately that was not a viable thing to do. And I then moved on to trying to get higher in the value chain and actually making products. And what I've got over here is my 2 injection molding machines, and these are machines that I once again open source designed online, but still had to get the components laser cut. I had to manufacture them myself. I ordered all the control electronics myself, and I wired up everything myself, from thermocouples all the way through to all the sensors and everything needed. And this is what we use to make some of our recycled products. And over here we have just an assortment of plastic in various colors, specifically polypropylene, that we use as our raw material. This is an injection molding or an extruder that I actually built myself as a prototype. And that machine, I then got someone to build a larger version of it for me, but unfortunately the person couldn't finish the process, and at the moment I am busy finishing this machine myself. Here's some of the components, and then similarly to my large shredder, this is an industrial grade extruder that I managed to pick up. I've recently acquired a 45 kilowatt motor to drive it, but this machine still has a lot of work to do to get it running. I also have a wash plant that I designed and built myself, so this was not an open source design. This is an actual running functional wash plant where we can wash the plastics in. This is just basically an overflow of some of our components, and then I also have my own machine shop where I cut and weld and work on materials myself. This is another sort of smaller shredder that I obtained a number of years ago, and this shredder was supposed to be used, but unfortunately it's still fairly low volume for my application. And then over here I've got my 3D printer, and then these are some of the things that we make in our injection molding machine. So this is just an assortment of various coasters that have been made, and they consist of about 25 recycled plastic bottle caps when we initially started the works, and at the moment we use those drums over there of raw material, and also these bags over here that are filled with various raw materials, specifically polypropylene in all sorts of colors, that we then use to make our components. That's our molds. And then I also have endeavored into trying to make some chopping boards. So these are still at the prototyping phase, but you can see the various iterations and the various attempts. Some worked, some didn't, but this is still a product we are developing, or I am developing. And yeah, this is my recycling space. The long-term goal is to make pellets. So that's why I've got an extruder, I've got a large shredder, and I've got a wash plant. And then I've got the cooling bath, which the material that comes out of the extruder goes in. And in the corner over there, I've got a pelletizer that chops it smaller. So this has all been self-funded. And then I am a mechanical engineer by trade. And as part of that, I love cars. I absolutely love cars. So this is my office, and this is basically where I sit and work and try to be as creative as possible. There's spare engines over here and just all sorts of things. So this is my mechanical engineering space where I try to get as creative as possible. And we were fortunate enough to actually land the Radisson as a client, and we actually produced these 250 of these coasters for them. where we actually use their own recycled waste. So, challenge at the moment, and I think what a lot of recyclers face in South Africa is we don't get funding. One can only do so much out of one's own pocket. So I work a full-time job, and after hours and on weekends I'm here. I also do a bunch of, well, not a bunch, a little consulting to try to bring in some scraps just to keep the business running. And at the moment, it's slow going, but it's something. It's honest work, it's hard work, and yeah, it would be nice to get some funding, but it's very difficult to get funding. And I think that's a huge challenge that a lot of recyclers face in this country, because I was fortunate enough to travel quite extensively when I worked as a specialist engineer at the Department of Environmental Affairs, and got to see how plastic recycling is done globally. And the largest challenge with that is recycling works globally and internationally if there is some form of incentive. So that would be the tax collected, which we know there's a fairly large amount of tax collected for plastics, which is supposed to be funneled back to recyclers or processors like myself to assist us in getting our businesses growing. So internationally, it's subsidized. So either the person manufacturing products from recycled plastics like myself is subsidized, or we basically see that the subsidy comes from the purchaser of the recycled goods. Because obviously if one does recycling, then one is going to have to add value, and that comes at a cost. So the biggest challenge really is in South Africa, we don't have that. There's no incentives for businesses to recycle, which means they won't pay more money for recycled products, which they inherently will be, or there's no subsidy that a recycler or producer like myself receives in order to do this job. So that's just a brief background of what's done here at Vukani Waste Management, the larger company, and what I call the recycled products, trash to chic. So at trash to chic, we keep ourselves busy with that. So let's see. We'll see where it goes, but I'll try my best to keep updating and just posting videos on how things are done, and just how, if there's anyone out there that wants to sponsor an aspirant recycler or has some machinery that they're not using at their facility, drop a comment. Thanks. Bye.